problem is that there are two types of problems. One is the supply shock, meaning the supplies have reduced of both these commodities, and there are other commodities impacted, which I will come to shortly. And on the other hand, because of the war, international oil prices have risen. You see, the government is unprepared primarily because it didn't anticipate, as it should have, that oil prices are going to remain high for a long time after clearly 2 or 3 weeks of the war. So we should have at the very least begun preparing from the middle of March. We are now in the middle of May. That means we have lost about 2 months of time.
Are these measures really going to help tackle the crisis when the real problem lies with a diplomatic solution?
In this situation, I don't know to what extent the Indian Prime Minister can intervene diplomatically. For that, it's way too late because we have shown ourselves to be, too one-sided in our foreign policy. So let's put that aside.
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. Days after pushing for fiscal austerity, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today chaired a cabinet meeting which, according to reports, prioritized immediate economic responses to the escalating West Asia crisis. With a briefing which was scheduled, the key questions are big austerity measures likely? Now, the second one is that austerity appeals over the last 2 days, what the PM has said. PM Modi delivered his dual austerity appeals across 2 consecutive days. And at a public address at a political gathering in Sikandrabad, that's where he made the 7 appeals. Now, what has happened today? This morning, just before the cabinet meeting, the size of PM Narendra Modi's carcade has been officially reduced at his instance, a significant move towards austerity, which is to act as a nudge for others in government to follow. Sources also said the Prime Minister has asked the Special Protection Group Elite Security Corps, which looks after his security, to try to reduce the number of cars in his convoy by 50%. Besides, he has desired that the number of electric vehicles in the fleet be encouraged, but without buying new ones to avoid additional expenditure. So since the time Prime Minister Modi has done that, Amit Shah's visuals also came across where he's cut down on the number of cars. Then there are visuals of judges who are cycling to the courts, whether it is in Bihar or there are several visuals which are there on the social media. But what will Prime Minister Modi achieve by embarking on these austerity measures? Why was he quiet all this while? Because the Iran war started on February 28th. And if on the floor of the parliament he said that a COVID-like situation, we may have to tackle the situation like the COVID. So why was he sitting pretty all this while? Why was he going so flamboyant when it came to elections, all the 5 state elections which he saw? Did we at all see those austerity measures? So what is Prime Minister Modi going to indicate? And how big is the crisis? One needs to understand that, because there's a panic. People are saying that let's start stocking up things within the families. That's what the general chatter within the household is. So we'll try and understand all of this. Joining me this evening is renowned economist Santosh Mehrotra. So thank you so much for joining. And I'll begin with this latest news where Prime Minister Modi has thought of cutting down the number of cars in his convoy, and likewise Amit Shah also has cut down the strength of the cars. The other ministries also have been asked to undertake austerity measures. Will it really help? And how big is the crisis? Are we staring at very, very big?
Yeah, the crisis that we are facing is serious, but it has been serious from day one, from the beginning of March. let's just remember that 88% of our energy needs come from abroad. We import them. We also import about half of our fertilizer. So we produce about half of our fertilizer domestically, but we also import fertilizer. And significant quantities of both these essential items are imported from the Gulf region. Um, so clearly, if the Strait of Hormuz has been closed ever since, tankers which were on the seas arrived. There was some special dispensation after, in the first 2 weeks after the war broke out, between India and Iran, after MEA Minister Jaishankar spoke to the foreign minister of Iran. Now, problem is that there are two types of problem. One is the supply shock, meaning the supplies have reduced of both these commodities, and there are other commodities impacted, which I will come to shortly. And on the other hand, because of the war, international oil prices have risen. You see, the government is unprepared primarily because it didn't anticipate, as it should have, that oil prices are going to remain high for a long time after clearly 2 or 3 weeks of the war. So we should have at the very least begun preparing from the middle of March. We are now in the middle of May. That means we have lost about 2 months of time. One could have given a certain amount of leeway to our own government for not being prepared. Please understand that the situation is serious because our stocks of oil and our stocks of LPG are nowhere close to the kind of stocks that are needed in a country which has the largest population of the world. The stocks that China maintains of these commodities are much higher. They could last for much longer. Therefore, their staying power is much greater, so there is no sense of crisis there. In any case, please note that we've been on the wrong side in respect of this war, and so this was already seen to be a foreign policy failure. The Chinese and the Russians are supporting Iran. We didn't even have the courage to criticize the decapitation of the top leadership of Iran, which took place within the first few days of the war, of an illegal war at that. So, just the fact that we are attempting to sign a trade deal with the US, which we should renegotiate in any case because it is a very weak interim trade deal, and just because we are importers of defense equipment and surveillance equipment from Israel, that doesn't mean that in a war of this kind, where an attack has been launched by a genocidal prime minister of Israel and a convicted felon of a president of the United States on hapless Iran, which has been under sanctions, which had done nothing to deserve this. They had already been attacked during negotiations in the middle of last year, and now while negotiations were going on, they've been attacked again. So they have the right to self-defense under international law, clearly. So they're taking every defensive action. Now the implications of this are very grim for the rest of the world and the rest of the world economy. Then we should have been prepared. Now we hadn't been prepared. Be that as it may, Neelu, it's absolutely critical that our we remain extremely vulnerable, and because for the last 2 months we've not taken enough preemptive action to prepare for this situation, other than increasing supplies of LPG. Now there's been a crisis of LPG. So the crisis in LPG supply has led to rise in prices at the retail level, and I don't have to tell you that there's been a massive shortage of LPG across the whole country for 2 months now. especially for the LPG that is used for industrial purposes, and the LPG that is used by hotels and restaurants. Now, the industrial LPG means that the small enterprises which depend on LPG to run their enterprises, to ensure that workers can continue to work, and products that they produce can continue to function. For instance, the Morbi factories of ceramics in Gujarat, or a whole series of other small units across the country. The second impact is felt through in the following way: that if restaurants are not able to access LPG, it means that they have to buy LPG on the black market, and of course, the official price has been raised. Now, under such circumstances, and the result is also that the price rises of small cylinders, 5 kilogram cylinders. You see, you and I might be using 14 kilogram cylinders. The poor in our urban areas can't afford to pay the 900 plus rupees for LPG cylinders. So they tend to have these small 5 kilogram cylinders, and even that they don't have the capacity to pay the full amount of 5 kilograms. So they get it refilled at a rate of 1 or 2 kilograms each time. Now they used to earlier do that at 100 rupees a kilogram normally. Now they're sort of paying 500 rupees, 600, 800 rupees. They are not capable of doing that. So so you have a double whammy for these workers. So units are closing down. Their wages are not very high in any case. So units are closing down, and of course they can't get
No, but in the cabinet meeting, yeah, Professor Mehrotra, but in the cabinet meeting, if you look at now, the government is considering curbing non-essential imports, including gold, reducing fuel consumption. Reports also indicate high-level discussions on promoting work from home, reduced official travel to manage oil price shocks.
Correct.
Import duties have been raised on gold and silver to 15% from 6%. Now, the economic strategy is that the PM Modi has urged citizens to limit the gold purchases and reduce the personal vehicle usage, highlighting that 85% of India's fuel is imported. Now, are these measures really going to help tackle the crisis when the real problem lies with a diplomatic solution, a simple thing of calling up the Iranian authorities, calling up the Iranian leadership and speaking to them? Prime Minister is not doing that, but he's expecting a lot of other things from his own citizens and passing the buck of his failure to the citizens.
Well, apparently we have bought some crude petroleum from Iran. The problem, of course, is that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed by Iran. So, it's not entirely clear that what Iran has done for us, they are likely to go any further than that. Our second difficulty is that there's no way that we can prevail upon Trump to reduce to allow our ships to go through, our tankers to go through, if Iran was supplying it, because the US Navy is blockading all ships. In other words, the attempt on the part of the United States is to blockade any ships coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. So, in this situation, I don't know to what extent the Indian Prime Minister can intervene diplomatically. Um, for that, it's way too late, because we have shown ourselves to be, too one-sided in our foreign policy. So let's put that aside. Honestly, I'm reasonably pleased to hear that they have raised the duty on gold, because there's exhortations by the Prime Minister to individual citizens that they should buy less gold is not going to go very far. It's good that they've raised the duty. That means it's going to raise the price of gold. However, we are still not seeing a rise in the price of petroleum, of petrol. We need to very quickly see a rise in the price of petrol, because otherwise consumption is not going to drop at all. Telling us telling the citizens to buy electric vehicles at this stage is not going to be helping in the short run. We have to sort of address the problem in the short run. The third thing that the government needs to do very quickly is to actually raise the prices of urea, because urea is being overconsumed and the government is sort of too frightened. Literally, it's just too frightened. Although elections are now quite far away, it's just too frightened of the farmers reacting. The fact of the matter is, raising urea prices will reduce the consumption of urea. Urea is being overused and it is harming the productivity of the soil. It's eroding the quality of the soil. It's reducing the productivity of our yields. And of course, it's costing a lot of money to the government, in the sense that last year the fertilizer subsidy overall, 85% of which is accounted for by urea subsidies, amounted to 1.85 lakh crores. And this year it's likely to be 2.3 lakh crores. So this is not in a situation where the fiscal deficit to GDP ratio is already at 4.4%. So the point here is, there are many actions that the government ought to be taking, which I don't see it so far taking. To say, oh, let's reduce the size of the convoy. This is a drop in the ocean.
Right. But what is the truth behind these stories which appeared in Mint and Times of India saying that 4 trillion was wiped off the share market once the Prime Minister Modi made those appeals? Did we actually lose that kind of money? Nobody is ready to believe. Many are going to the extent of saying that no, these are false reports. But how would one agree? And
No,
especially the sectors, the tourism, aviation, jewelry, all that. If you look at those sectors, a huge amount of money, it seems, has got wiped off.
I know. Of course, I'm not surprised. We've seen that almost every day, Nifty's been falling and Sensex has been falling. So obviously, ordinary investors are going to get hurt as a result of this. There's no question about it. So honestly, there is no particular reason for the Prime Minister to be actually making these kinds of exhortations. Rather, if we saw actual action of the kind that I have just mentioned, it's good that they've taken the action on gold. Um, and and honestly, we are in that situation where if they don't take action on urea, they'll have to take a bigger action later on. If they don't take action on petrol, and they must not increase the price of diesel, I have to say, because diesel will actually increase inflation for everyone. Real wages have not been increasing for 10 years. Huh? You already saw, Neelu, that workers were rioting in Panipat, in Manesar, in Faridabad, in the NCR area, in Noida, and because of low wages, and because the wages are supposed to be increased in line with the consumer price index, as the CPI rises with inflation. They had not been raised. They were still getting 10, 11,000 rupees a month. So anyway, point is concrete action. And it's extremely tragic at this juncture that the government, after, they've just notified the rules of the 4 labor codes. The central labor codes, which had all been notified in November 25, 2025, their central government rules have now been notified. Now, in the central government rules for these labor codes, which now become actual law, right? There's no mention of a living wage. There's no mention of raising minimum wages. See, this is going to happen later. What is the meaning of this? When we know the data is very clearly showing, what is the chief economic advisor doing? Why are they not explaining to the government that if you do not allow minimum wages to be raised, then people will continue to live, uh, from day to day. They have very little savings, and every price shock that is coming on account of the war, is going to mean that there would be rioting on the streets. You've already seen rioting on the streets. Why do you want this to happen? You don't want this to happen. So making exhortations, विदेश मत जाइए, विदेश में शादियां न करिए, बच्चों को आप विदेश न भेजिए,
No, but do
गोल्ड
you think that any other country has done it, urging the citizens to consume 10% less edible oil? I mean, I found this so bizarre.
I agree with you. I mean, already the consumption of edible oil in our country is relatively low. It could be much higher. I mean, we all know that 20% of our adult population suffers from a body mass index which is below the minimum body mass index, which sort of classifies adults. 20% of India's adults in 2021, according to the National Family Health Survey, as being too small and too thin. So they being essentially malnourished. So in that situation, you are advising our citizens, our poorest people, to actually consume less edible oil. I mean, fat and protein, which is dal, right? Because people can't consume fish and meat so much, and dal is one thing that they. Now we importing dal, continue to import dal. We continue to import edible oils, and the share of edible oils that we are still importing only in the last 10 years fallen from 55% of total consumption to 45% of total consumption. That's not good enough. So clearly, what if we were to demonstrate serious action to increase the production of, and in the short run, maybe just procurement of dal and of edible oil and supplying it through the PDS in the short run, that would be real action. Honestly, that would be real action. But we're not doing that. We're not raising the price of urea, which we should be doing, because it will actually.
But do you believe, Professor Mehrotra, that if Prime Minister Modi tries to hold some sort of communication or open some sort of a communication channel with Tehran, directly speaking to Mujtaba Khamenei or the president himself, do you think that could make a difference? Because we have old civilizational ties with Iran. Iran still considers us as a friend, and so why can't we do that? We are putting the entire population of India under trouble.
No, Neelu, you have a point. Uh, I think I raised the difficulty with doing that. Even if he were to do that, suppose Iran was to agree to sell India more oil than it is selling to, let us say, other countries. Huh? And clearly, whatever price is available on the international market, we have to pay. There is no question about that. Suppose that was to be done, are we also going to be able to prevail upon President Trump to allow our tankers to come through, because they're blockading our every ship? So we've got an impasse here. We've got a deadlock on the international scenario, and we don't have any clout with the United States. So with Iran, I mean, we can make an entreaty, a plea to the president of Iran, but that's not going to solve the problem. We have no choice but to do everything humanly possible in the short run, and in the medium run, we've got to see how we build up stocks of LPG, we build up greater stocks of oil, we become less dependent on imported fertilizer, we become less dependent on imported edible oils, and also dals and lentil imports. These are the long-term actions. But other than the 4 or 5 immediate actions that could be taken, I don't see anything else that the government at this point because that the government, on account of its weak handling or bad handling of foreign policy in the Gulf area, by being very open, one-sided, and being very friendly with the United Arab Emirates. Now, look at the situation here. The United Arab Emirates is hand in glove with Israel, and is the one sort of state among the six Gulf countries, which is hand in glove with the United States also. It has bases in the United States, or US bases in the UAE. So, given this situation, now, believe it or not, our Prime Minister has made 7 visits in the last 10 or 12 years to the UAE, which means that we seem to clearly have a very special relationship with the UAE, who are already quite clearly, part of the US Israel side in this war. So, we are in a very tight situation because of our foreign policy position that we have taken. And we have not taken sufficient precautionary action in the last 2 months. So now there is a panic, and there's no question that there is a panic, because if there was not a panic, there wouldn't be these kind of exhortations. I am still hoping that petrol prices will be raised soon. I'm still hoping that, as in COVID, or maybe in the winter months of the country, where pollution rises, you sort of say, okay, only odd and even number cars will be used every alternate day. These kinds of actions could have been put in place already. They need to be put in place right now, honestly. So, and everything needs to be ensured on a war footing, that LPG's production is increased, and LPG supplies to the agencies, and delivery to the households is increased really quickly, so that this situation, which has now prevailed for 2.5 months and may likely to continue. I have said repeatedly that Iran is determined to make sure that this war lasts, because it has two goals, it has two objectives. The United States leaves the Gulf and the Gulf bases. It has 15 bases. I mean, the United States has 800 plus bases across 80 countries of the world, of which 15 are located in the Gulf. So, we cannot be seen to be too one-sided in our foreign policy. That's one goal they have. So, until that goal is achieved. Secondly, their second big goal is that as a country, they've been under economic sanctions. And those economic sanctions that the United States and Europe, etc., have imposed on Iran have hurt us. And how have they hurt us? I want your listeners to understand this. They've hurt us in the following way. That, you see, as you rightly pointed out, Iran has been a long-standing friend of ours. We used to import oil from Iran until 2019. After the economic sanctions were reimposed by Trump in Trump 1 presidency, we had to stop importing oil from Iran. Now, clearly, in other words, there's a spillover effect of the economic sanctions being reimposed on Iran for India. Then we started importing Russian oil. Now, of course, the Americans are saying, no, you can't even import Russian oil. We'll impose 50% tariffs on you. Now, so we are in an utterly ridiculous foreign policy situation where we are getting hemmed in on all sides. So we have to stand with the BRICS countries who are pushing back against Trump, and saying that you cannot continue to sort of apply economic sanctions against any and every country. Effectively, we've already had economic sanctions imposed on us by the United States, by them telling us, no, you cannot import Russian oil. So we cut Russian import of oil. So we first cut Iranian import of oil, then we cut Russian import of oil. I mean, how beholden are we going to become to the United States? We are already so beholden to the United States. In the interim trade deal that was signed.
My last question, sir, is Professor Mehrotra, that many people have been talking about a grave depression we are heading to. A depression in the sense that, are we heading to a recession? which Prime Minister Modi, of course, will not say, but that's the reality of the crisis which is staring at us.
Absolutely, no question. We are heading into a recession on the one hand, and we are heading into a inflationary spiral. The inflationary spiral will be caused, A, by the rise in prices that will result from the shortages of the various commodities that we are already seeing. Now, we've not mentioned helium. So that's one thing that we are heading for, rising inflation. And because of rising inflation and because of the oil prices having risen, the demand for dollars is going to remain high because international oil prices are very high. So the rupee is going to continue to tumble. If the RBI decides to protect the rupee, defend the rupee, it's already since the war has had begun, the rupee has gone to from about 90 or 91, it has gone to sort of 90, 95 rupees, 65 paise. So this is going to continue, which is going to increase our import bill for everything, for oil, for fertilizer, for gold, for everything, whatever we import, for machinery. That means there'll be cuts in the imports of machinery and other products and any inputs that we might be importing. So clearly, we are heading for this reason towards an inflationary spiral. And because of the inflationary spiral, we are going to see a reduction in domestic demand. And because of the war causing international oil prices to rise, there's going to be a tepid demand for our exports across the
Right.
globe, not just in the United States,
Absolutely.
even if we had a trade deal.
Right. All right, Professor Mehrotra, thank you so much for joining on HW News. Thank you, sir.